Yes, it's time for us to talk about big bad builders here at Cladding Matters. And as you notice in that last stanza, Justice coming right on time. And we'll be talking more about that with Steve shortly. But first of all, as ever, I'm going to mercilessly throw Hamish under the bus.
It always is sort of quite dubious. And I'll explain this to start off with. Much of the work which I do within my own business relies on data, relies on information given by people. And we rely very much on an organisation called Building Control, and they are meant to investigate the build progress of what goes on. Now, what Cladding Matters is about what happens during the course of building, which should be beneath. It should be Building Control investigating how things are put together. And they pass it off and say, fine, absolutely, everything's going according to plan. You're okay to have that. Now, what sort of happened, we had Grenfell 7 years ago now, just over 7 years ago now. And it came out with certain recommendations about certain materials, which were, some were good, some were bad, some were indifferent, and some were totally disastrously dangerous to actually sort of put into sort of buildings of any kind at all. And it just so happened that certain buildings in the UK have actually sort of been built using materials which are worse than those used in Grenfell, which killed 76 people during the course of a fire. And evidence was revealed about this, and the tests of this, they were revealed, I believe, approaching 5 years ago now. But somehow or other, no evidence was made available, and it was hidden. It was purposely hidden because if people became aware of it, there would obviously be cause for concern. That information wasn't. Now, I don't just say that on my own. BBC investigators actually found this out. And I think we'll leave a little bit more to Steve. But what the concern is, moving forward, can we really rely on a builder being responsible? We're not just speaking about Barrett's here, we're speaking about any builder. Can we rely on that builder being able to actually truthfully say this building is perfectly all right and safe for residents to move into?
Good Lord. Well, before we get to Steve, I'm just going to quickly bring Zahrah. Zahrah, what a turn of events.
Yeah. I mean, I've completely lost faith in any new build that's being bought. And there's lots and lots of loopholes for potential buyers to be looking out for. It's not just, isn't the property that I'm buying okay? They've got to look out whether it's a house or a flat, whether or not the estate is being handed over to a private management company. Because as I pointed out on the Property Lawyers Alliance page, that, the developers more and more are keeping these roads and sewers private. They've got nobody acting for the management company to ask whether or not the roads and sewers are being built to standard. So they could cobble them together any old how, hand it over to the management company, and the residents still have to pay for it. Now, if you were buying, and normally you'd be asking, when is the local authority going to adopt? When is the water authority going to adopt? And you'd look for the indemnity covenants from the developers. But if they turn around and say, well, it's going to remain in private ownership, the questions fall away as to the standard that's been installed, because most conveyancers wouldn't have a clue what question to ask.
Good Lord. Wendy, are we up a certain creek without a certain implement?
It certainly feels like it. And I think the latest developments that have happened, which I'm sure Steve is going to divulge and tell us all about in a lot more detail.
Yes, I'm looking forward to that. Yes,
actually, to me, asks way more questions than it actually provides any answers for, because it feels like not only have the developers let homeowners down, but also the people who are supposed to be there to protect us as end consumers and make sure that the builders are actually building according to the regulations, and they seem to be letting us down too.
I don't think it's the contractors though on these building sites that are doing are the problem. I think it's the overall. I think it's, I don't know, it's a mixture of building control. I think it's a whole bunch of things at foot here. Steve, I'm not going to preface anything. Tell us all.
Well, so we've been doing some digging at Royal Artillery Quays, and basically what we found is Barratt's remediation plan with the combustible fire stairs, where they want to leave untested combustible XPS panels going right up 16 stories, is well known, and we've covered it multiple times. But the justification for leaving those combustible panels on the fire stairs is that the fire stairs were built to regulations at the time of construction. Well, Greenwich Council, in an email to the residence management agent Rendell and Rittner, said in 2019 that it was not compartmentalized. There are gaps internally on between the stairs and the external wall for the fire and smoke to go up and down, and therefore, in the council's view, it didn't meet the building regulations at the time of construction. At the time, which was in 2002, 2004, and the building regulations then were the 2000 regs. So you can't have holes in the fire stair internal walls. It's not compartmentalized. They said it doesn't meet regs, and to put it in their words, they said they're surprised it was ever signed off.
So hang on a moment.
Sat on.
Oh, hang on a moment. So the premise by which they're rebutting your approach to them to bloody remediate this nonsense is that it was all right at the time, and it turns out it wasn't all right at the time. So this is just throwing them into further unpleasant light, is it not?
Well, that's right, and you know how hard I've been trying to fight them on the fire stairs to get them to take the stuff off, and they were just basically saying that we're following a fire engineer and the rest of it. Well, that's all predicated on the fact that the fire engineer checked if there were holes in the fire stairs in the internal walls, and you know, you don't have to look very far. There's a good 30 centimeter gap between the stair and the wall, and it's a glass wall at that, unfire rated glass. Anyway, so that's the first thing we found. So that means the building safety regulator, because we wrote to them this week, has now delayed the project by a month. They were meant to sign off today, funnily enough, but they didn't, because they don't want to get themselves into trouble. But in addition to that, Barratt said the internal walls between flats don't need to be tested because it's masonry, you know, brick in between. Well, we found a report, 500-page report, that says it's not masonry, it's drywall, which is plasterboard-like material between the flats. And they recommend that an immediate survey across the whole development is done. Both of these revelations have been sat on by the managing agent, and I've tried so hard to get them to do it, and they've rebutted me with falsehoods. And that's what we're up against. And then that's a separate matter, compliance with the regulations at the time of construction, with the dodgy, flammable, untested remediation plan that condemns us to permanently high insurance. So you can see there's two different matters, but all acting in parallel. And to be honest, there's not much left of the building that actually is okay.
Oh, good Lord. Look, next time they're going to build the building out of straw. Save a bit of time on the middleman. Hamish, it would appear to me that things that we've held sacred up till now have been craven idols. That we believed certain things have been in place, and more we're finding the very structure upon which these things were predicated is wrong.
Well, I think it's fortunate we have with us today, we have both Zahrah and we have Wendy, who have a lot more experience on aspects of build and what does actually sort of go on with them. There's Zahrah, for example, trying to protect anybody that's buying into a property, whether it be for letting purposes. This is the big concern that we have, because an awful lot of these properties are being bought up by overseas investors who obviously haven't a clue what they're buying into, when we actually sort of realise the state of, I was going to say health, the state of ill health, the danger that exists within an awful lot of these. And I think if anybody looks at the BBC article, I've tried to suggest people review, where they're actually testing, they're checking the materials out in Australia, funnily enough. Why should it be Australia that's actually we're getting the information from? And this information has been available for all those particular 3 years. So the concern is, why have we got, with different factions involved, why is it there's no togetherness about this? But even our government, apparently Barrett's are being able to turn around. And I do say Barrett's because they're all artillery keys. Now, there are other places which are in the worst position than Royal Artillery Keys, and there's some of them they haven't even found yet. They haven't even come out of the woodwork yet. They will. Some of them will come out, but it is absolutely frightening. And as Zahrah says, she's there to try and protect people. Wendy's trying to guide people into that first investment of theirs. They've somewhere to live. And of course, unfortunately, there's Steve sat in the middle of one of them with all of this fire risk. And no matter what he does, no matter what he says, he gets damned from all sides.
Yes. Zahrah, I believe you've got a question for Steve.
Yeah, I wanted to ask Steve why the local fire department haven't taken action if it's that dangerous.
Well, I had a chat with a Mr. Creary from the London Fire Brigade for Greenwich, and he told me that it's the building safety regulator's responsibility and not the fire brigades. Now, they are the enforcing authority, and we don't believe that is correct. But they're buck-passing the state of danger at Royal Artillery Keys with the dangerous fire stairs, who you would think that they would care about, right? It's their members going into the fires. But they just said, oh, well, you need to go to the building safety regulator, nothing to do with us, Gov. That's our fire brigade. And also, I'll just do a quick plug. On the national news at the moment, Royal Artillery Keys is prominent for EPS cladding, which is a really nasty firing cladding. And we've been after this test evidence from, test footage from Australia and Victoria, who proved EPS is as dangerous as ACM cladding, which was on Grenfell, burns the same rate. So it's been on the BBC Breakfast, BBC One News. It will be on the BBC 6 News and the BBC 10 News tonight, all about Royal Artillery Keys, the EPS test, and basically trying to raise awareness that this dangerous cladding that is on our buildings tonight shouldn't be on buildings below 80 meters. And they, the government, even though it's banned in Australia, are allowing EPS to go on new builds below 80 meters now. We haven't learnt the lessons. We're putting flammable firelighters on new buildings now. Check the news, everyone.
You know, if you're talking to somebody that's buying, you know, the solicitor doesn't get the specs. The solicitor doesn't know what they're looking for. And every time I see someone, you know, buying, it's got, you know, it's covered in wooden paneling, whatever the height, you're kind of, you know, as a conveyancer, you can't say to them that, you know, from the legal side of things, we're happily being given certificates, but you're not going to know till 3-4 years, maybe 10 years down the line that those solicitors, those certificates were given sign off, as we're finding out now, but actually it's lies.
Wendy, it just seems to be an unconscionable situation. I mean, the area you mostly focus on are people new to the marketplace, but it must be a nightmare for them not being able to get necessarily the right information to make decisions. And if they do make a decision based on this information, it turns out that in retrospect, it might be wrong.
Indeed. And in fact, this is a section of the market which is quite often preyed on by unscrupulous people because of the fact that they haven't got the knowledge, they haven't got the experience, and quite often they are trusting in blind faith that what they are given and what they are told is the truth. And it's quite alarming that not only are developers building homes that didn't even meet the regulation standards at the time, but that they were actually signed off by building control. And I guess the question I have for Steve is, is there going to be any recourse back to the building control inspector who actually signed this off in the first place?
Steve, can I pass the ball to you then?
Yeah, well, it's a great question. So our building control was an NHBC, a privatized building control. So the Greenwich Council building control that came and investigated was surprised that they signed off the non-compliance stairs and raised this in 2019. The thing is, with building control, there's no legal liability on them to, sign off compliant buildings. And I think that's the weakness. And I think they should be held liable because that will focus their minds then when they're signing off buildings. But if they don't have liability, then really you need the Earl of Lytton scheme, to hold the developer liable, because the problem we've got is they're not liable. And Barratt Redrow, who have been recognised as the new master builder and the only UK master builder, has basically said to the National Cladding Campaign in a meeting, and I'll make the link available because I was quite shocked at this, that we're fully aware of the permanently high insurance of the B1 rating. They blame the insurance industry, but they said we aren't going to do it for any development in the country and give them a EWSA 1. They're digging in, and as a society we need to say no. If you want to be recognised as the nation's master builder, why are you doing the minimum you can get away with? And even then, if you look at Royal Artillery Quays, without any test evidence, I would say they're not even doing that. But these builders are now digging in to a position which is putting people at risk. And as a society, we need to say no. The government are protecting them, as we've seen with the new master builder. The whole setup of the country is to do whatever the builders want. And that's the problem we've got. And we need to change that. And that's what these calls on this podcast are. That's what we're doing on the BBC. That's what we're trying to do in the House of Lords. But we need more and more support for this if we want this to happen as a country.
Hamish, it seems that we are beset by lunacy. And it would have thought, I would have thought by now that Barratt would have given up the ghost and said, yeah, I don't want any more bad publicity. For God's sake, let's get it done. Yet they still continue.
I think we have a sad aspect here. They're worth multi-billions between them. The top builders, and we call them big bad builders. Are they big bad builders? But they're all doing it. I don't think there's anything else we could sort of mention about it. And just as a matter of interest, and this is why that BBC article is well worth watching, because Steve was speaking about one of the great things is the financial implications of buying a property. And it's been also mentioned by Wendy and Zahrah here, the financial implications, what they were saying. And this is not high flats or high-rise building or anything that is spoken about on the BBC. I think there's only 4 or 5 stories there. And their insurance premium has gone up from $2,000 a year to $20,000.
How does that work?
I don't know.
How does that work?
Well, it's because of CPS. It's because of CPS. You put in a load of molten plastic that burns easily, and then the insurer increases the premium. There's nothing wrong on the insurance side. It's just if these builders abuse people, then the insurer's pricing the risk. So they're getting abused twice on the safety level and also financially.
Zahrah just put a comment over to me about NDAs. What do you mean by that, Zahrah?
That's a non-disclosure agreement. So this is why we're not seeing a lot more of this out in the public, is because the developers basically say, we'll do this for you if you keep your mouth shut and don't tell anyone.
Oh, what?
Yeah.
It just feels like Harvey Weinstein all over again. People sending out NDAs to not tell how bad his terrible behaviour. This is happening all over again, yet on a different scale. Nuts. Right, there's got to be some positive about this. Steve, come on, help us find a little bit of positive before we wind this up.
Well, the good thing is the building safety regulator is the body that Barratt can't get one over. they're there. Their name is on the sign-off, right? Do they really want to sign off untested combustible product, unlawful fire stairs that never met regs at the time of build? Do they really want to sign off 1,000 residents condemning them to fire risks, permanently high insurance, and all the rest of it? No, they won't want to do that, and that's why they're not doing it. And there's some hope there. And then back in the Lords with the Earl of Lytton's building safety scheme, we want to make consumer protection for blocks of flats happen. And you know, we've actually seen people that really want to do something about it in the industry. I've had lots of fire engineers when we were working on the EPS footage in the last 2 weeks for the BBC Today. I've had lots of fire engineers say, "You've got to keep going, Steve. This is a battle. This is about greed. It's about money. It's about covering up fire tests, mis-selling products, installing products to save money. It's about big business, and it's about covering it all up." And, you know, we're on the right side of this. Anyone that cares about building safety, anyone that cares about just decency in human life, right? Why should we be screwing over people in their house? And, you know, as a society, we need to encourage not just keeping our heads in the sand, but actually challenging where matters matter. And I think that's what we're trying to do here. And that's what you guys are doing through supporting me and many others that are. And we keep the fight going. It may be a bit of a marathon rather than a sprint, but there may be a few snakes and ladders, maybe more ladders than snakes, hopefully.
Let's hope.
Shortcuts. This podcast is one of them. So thank you.
Oh, no, a pleasure. Hamish, take us home, please.
Well, I mean, one of the great things is we know there's work being done, and both Steve and Zahrah are actually they get into the House of Lords and battle on behalf of the residents, which we are very, very thankful for. Because it's a lot of hard work and it's unpaid work. It takes time out of their lives to actually protect the lives of others, and they're not being respected for it, particularly by the builders. So really tremendous respect we have for the type of work that's going on in the background. And of course, there's just more and more revelations coming out. But what is good, it is being aired, starting to be aired in the public, and people just cannot carry on. Or I say people, I say those, the ownership of these big builders need to start investigating what they're allowing to happen whilst they're taking their fantastic, great bonuses. And just to add to that, I was somewhat disgusted, but it was a known fact. When Barrett's took over the company they've just taken over, they're closing down offices here, there, and all over the place. They couldn't give a monkeys about the livelihoods of their own employees, never mind the lives of the people that live in their properties.
I don't know why I'm not surprised, I have to say. So there we have it. Big bad builders can no longer hide their misdoings under complexities of legal nastiness, but instead it's coming out into the public. There are specials on the BBC, there are mentions on the news, and I think justice is finally on its way over the hill, coming in time. All I have to do is thank, of course, Hamish McLeod, Search Convey, Steve Day of Building Safety Scheme.org, Wendy Gibson of the First Night Bride Club, and of course, Zahrah Aullybocus, the expert from Nexa Law. These guys is what helps keep this podcast to be focused on reality, not surreality or mysticism, which seems to be the way others seem to be taking it. So until next time, please try and keep your feet on the ground, keep reaching for the stars, look after that mental health. Take care all. Bye-bye now.